What is up, and welcome to episode 2 of Checkin the Gate. This is your weekly podcast. We talk about everything film, television, and industry related. And I'm your host, Owen Rogers. So, recapping my week, here in Atlanta, we had a snowstorm that never happened. I don't know if any of you guys live in cities or in municipalities where any sort of precipitation, whether snow or rain, just completely derails everything. But here in Atlanta, the threat of snow basically gave us a state of emergency and we could not do anything. What did that mean for me? Unfortunately, it meant missing a screening of the upcoming Infant Icon movie, which is a Paris Hilton documentary, which I was very interested in seeing. That's been making the rounds here, I'm sure, in a couple other markets as well. But the snow made it so that I couldn't go. And I wish, how does she say it? That's hot. It was cold. So yikes. But other than that, I have to start off by saying rest in peace to Catherine O'Hara. I thought she was a very talented actress. And honestly, it's just sad and it's interesting to see when we have talents like her make either a late stage push or a late stage renaissance. And I think for her, it was very much a renaissance. So having gone from being the mother in Beetlejuice and in everybody's favorite Home Alone, to then having a bit of a backseat in terms of the public eye, to then maturing and having Rebirth, which is Creek, bringing back Beetlejuice, and she was having a moment. And it's very interesting as an actor to me what it takes for those ups and those downs. And, similar, I think, to music as well, when you see artists that make it at older ages or, whether that is like a Fabio Foreign or even like a 2 Chainz, when you see these people that make it older, you're like, okay, well, it's interesting what they had to do to get on at those particular moments. Or when you see people that reinvent themselves and become back into the cultural zeitgeist like she was, it takes a lot to do that. And so saddened to hear about her. I think she was, someone that was hitting on a bunch of different notes. So she was making it with, the people that are very much into the fandom. She's making it in with people that were into prestige television like myself. And, she was an it girl. And so it kind of came out of nowhere. So definitely shout out to her and to her family, and, appreciate people while they're there. And, never be afraid to revisit or to try for the first time, no matter who you are or where you're at in your own journey. It's going to be a race that you go at your own pace, and that's the most important thing. All right, so let's get it. Beyond that, I'll just talk to you about this week. For me, I had 2 more auditions. Both of those were off Actors Access. I'm someone that is like very much obsessed with IMDb. That's my advice as an actor. So I jumped probably, I would say 50,000 star meter points. I'm at, last time I checked, 280 something thousand star meter points. And for reference point, I think the biggest, or the lower the number, the better. And the lowest number of an African American actor, last time I checked, was Tiana Taylor, who I think was number 10. And its popularity largely goes off of how much you're searched via the IMDb database, but a couple of other factors, including, the back end and their proprietary algorithm. But I'm at about 280 something thousand right now. My goal is to try to get to 100,000 by the end of 2026. And I think there's a lot of different ways to do that, but I'm very much intrigued by that algorithm. And I think, there's a lot of what goes into being a professional actor. definitely there's talent, but there's also understanding how to navigate and understanding how to represent and understanding narrative. For me, my approach is to try to take a very aggressive stranglehold on my own personal narrative and doing things like this podcast, Checking the Gate. Shout out to all you guys out there. But doing things to bolster my own presence in the film community and to create a very clear narrative as to how I'm going to position myself and the things that I'm doing within the film space is my approach. And one of those big things is IMDb. So go out there, search me if you haven't. But definitely something I think I'd love to hear what other working actors, what their thoughts and their approaches are. I often look at other people's, and it's hard to say. There are definitely people who are established and who are working who doesn't seem like they put any sort of impetus into it. And then there's other people who I think they have that as one of their primary focuses. I will say, and IMDb isn't paying me, but they can if they want to. It definitely is great for search engine optimization. It definitely boosted up. If nothing else, if you are trying to hit that algo a little bit harder. But yeah, that's what's been for me. These different auditions, which have been cool. I did one of them via a recording of myself as the scene partner, which we talked about last week. And that was good. It was a little bit of like a double Dutch situation in terms of getting the timing right, but I think I nailed it. And so I'll definitely let you guys hear back from those. For most of the auditions that I submit, I don't hear anything back. So you just kind of put it into the ether and you wait. Sometimes you'll hear a little something weeks later. Sometimes they'll say no. Sometimes they'll say yes. But I'm also trying to expand where my radius is for willingness to work. So based in Atlanta, but I've been looking at more stuff in North Carolina and Tennessee more recently, and they seem to have some interesting projects. So curious to see how that goes and how those auditions go as well. But yeah, that's basically been my week. Other than that, a lot of TV. So let's get into it. And this is the Checking the Gate segment where we do a rapid recap of all the different shows that I watched this week in television. And I watch a lot of stuff and I watch a variety of stuff. So let's start off by talking about industry. We talked about some of the kinkiness that was going on there. But this week's episode was fucking crazy. First of all, I love dialects. I love the sound of English accents. Some of the biggest sonic joys that I got from this week's episode. You start off, first of all, with someone being called a pussy hole, which is chef's kiss. I'm definitely going to start incorporating that into my lexicon. Another one that we had this week was I'm trying to remember how this is. So it was integral, which to me, I pronounce it integral. But hearing the different spins where they are is very interesting to me. And to that point, one of the characters who, spoiler alert, this is going to be a spoiler alert for season 4, episode 4 of Industry. So if you haven't, this is again your spoiler alert. One of the characters who dies in this week's episode is the actor from Stranger Things that we talked about last week as well. And it's interesting to hear the dedication and the choices that you have American actors make when they put on British accents. And I know that there's a bunch, people work on their Cockney accents and all that stuff. As an actor, for me, I always am fascinated when I hear these things. It's, on the one hand, I look at it and I'm just like, unless it was a role that I just couldn't turn down either for the money or for, my own artistic gravity towards the role, I just wouldn't even attempt to approach something that I think there would be a chance for me to have mixed reviews, not only on my performance, but on just the delivery from an accent standpoint. So it's very interesting to me when these actors try to shape these things on the choices they make. And then also what motivates them to even try to do these roles. And so you hear it, sometimes you don't, but I personally am at that point where I'm trying to understand and embrace my artistry enough to be like, okay, well, this is a challenge. I've had to do a Jamaican accent a couple of times for a couple of auditions, which I did not land the roles. No shock there. But it's very interesting to me, that part of acting. And I'm someone that I come from a communications background, so I'm all about the tone and the intonation and trying to convey what the concept is behind a particular set of words or a particular line read, more so than I am focused on the sonics and the phonetics of it. And so trying to grow along that path and understand what that level of artistry and how those layers look is important to me as well. So beyond that, I want to talk Haley, who is played by the young Sally Draper from Mad Men, is all grown up now, and she was the one that was wilding out, having her little tasting menu last week, as I mentioned. And this week she is showing out and she is showing ass. And so it was very interesting, her character arc, to see that they have written her as someone who I think is a baby face. And I think most of her career, she was on Sabrina the Teenage Witch previously as well, has been someone that is, very angelic. But they kind of gave her a little bit of edge and fangs this episode, where she is shown a willingness to play the game, and that she's not just a piece on the board, but that she is someone that is making the moves and has her own agenda as well. And she capped off a little bit of that turn with showing us her ass, and that was interesting, unsolicited, but you do what you do out here. And then also from an acting standpoint, as I mentioned before, I'm getting to a point now where if it's a good performance, I'm watching it and I'm thinking, okay, how would I do this, or what are the difficulties in doing that? And in this episode, the character Henry, he had a speech that he was delivering, and he was nervous about the speech. It was a bunch of investors, if you've seen the episode. And in watching it, they do a great job, both in terms of the score and the cinematography of establishing what the stakes are. But then you also see throughout this speech that he starts off very, very anxious, very insecure with what he's about to say. He gains a little bit of momentum, and there's like 3 or 4 different shifts before he finally lands the plane. And so being an actor and having to go on camera and portray someone that is nervous, and then portray someone that then goes on a tangent from being nervous to then gets a little bit of confidence, but then brings it home. The oscillation that's required there is also really dope. And I thought he did a great job, where there were definitely points where I was like, okay, I'm bored. What is he doing? And then there are also points where I was like, okay, he's 100% captivating me, and he has my attention in the span of 90 seconds. So for an actor to do that, and definitely for the director and the cinematographer to be able to play to the actor while doing that, I thought was dope. So if you haven't seen that, I think that was a very good example of what someone's acting can do in tandem with the cinematography, but also showing you a range in terms of how you're going to embody your confidence throughout, and not just necessarily having a straight build up, but I think there were a couple ups and downs throughout that. And also, yeah, the ending is crazy. Yeah, this episode went for it. Probably the best episode of the season. Definitely the best episode of the season. Maybe the best episode of the entire series, if I'm being honest. There's just a lot going on there, and the stakes have been set. And yeah, we saw Rishi's freaking, yeah, he jumps off of a cliff in an attempt to flee the cops after having a person overdose. And crazy because they do such a good job of setting up the scene where someone is setting up Rishi in this, and they're all drugged out, but this guy comes and just keeps on turning up the music, and you're conscious of it, but you're not really understanding what's going on. And then you find out through the end of the episode that this guy that was in his house was turning up the music in order to have the cops be called to come and to check up on them, knowing that there's going to be drugs and potentially a dead body, which, you know, is, I think, chess levels. And the guy that turns up the volume excuses himself very nonchalantly prior to everything going down. And so, yeah, industry, man, they're doing things over there. Next show we'll talk about is St. Denis Medical. Big fan of that show. If you're into 30-minute scripted comedies, it is a mockumentary style. A lot of the shows on NBC are. It's very much in that tone. But David Alan Grier, he's a steady hand. He's on that show. And this week we see the romance between Chaplain Steve and Serena kind of develop and become weird, and a bunch of different love triangles that I thought was cool. And then we also see the chemistry between Bruce and Joyce. And Bruce, I know him from House of Cards, but they have a bit of an age gap, and they're both kind of like the awkward, but also completely unaware people in this work dynamic in this hospital. One's a nurse and one is like the head. One is a surgeon and the other one is the head of like admin. And so seeing them be paired up and go on their little side quests has been interesting. But then also there's a little bit of sexual tension there. I was like, are they going to do it? And they very clearly address that. Bruce says, just that we're clear, there's no way this is ever going to happen. But I think it might. And if you're watching St. Denis Medical, then I think you might also think it is. Another 30-minute show that I've been watching is Stumble. That show was interesting this week. The show kind of is this another mockumentary also on Peacock / NBC. And it felt a lot more like Parks and Recreation this week. The storyline for this season is that they have an AI company come in that gives money to the town. And there was a similar plot line in Parks and Rec where the city is essentially getting money from having a larger corporation come in and having their headquarters there. But they talk about the stretching of the resources from water to electricity that having an AI company in your town creates, which is something that I think is not at the top of mind for a lot of people that use like ChatGPT or a lot of these other learning language models or large language models or any other kinds of AI. But it's something that I think big picture, we're going to have to try to figure out how that's going to work, because just the extent to which it is draining our resources for making our lives easier is a balancing act that we have not quite figured out. Outside of Stumble, I've also watched this week Animal Control and Going Dutch. Both of those shows are on Fox. Those are Fox 30-minute comedies. And if you are a real TV head, you can tell the difference between a Fox 30-minute comedy and a NBC 30-minute comedy. It's kind of like the difference between like Malcolm in the Middle and like 30 Rock. Like totally, you can kind of, those are some weird reference points, but also I think hit the point home well. But Animal Control stars Joel McHale and a couple of other people. It's been very cool this season. There's a lot going on, but we see that Shred, who is one of the characters on that show, he's just starred for Bromance, and so it's interesting to see his character finally get a little bit of a little bit of love from his male counterpoints, not in a romantic way, but just he's a bro that needs some bro love, and he even turns down his girlfriend to go pursue this love, and he has a secret girlfriend, and his girlfriend on her side unintentionally Emily ends up getting a friend who's in on her secret. So things start to develop from the relationships on that show as well. Very interesting, very lighthearted, but I think Fox in general is a little bit raunchier and more interesting than NBC, which is usually a little bit more polished and a lot more like zingy. And then Going Dutch is interesting because this episode this week was about a turkey heist, which I think is probably a result of the show getting repositioned and perhaps pushed or cut or whatever, but rescheduled from being around Thanksgiving time to now at the beginning of February, end of January, having an episode about turkeys. But they are they're in Europe as Americans on an army base in this show. So interesting, but also whenever you have something like that, where you have programming alignment or you have shows that are being pushed back to back, where you have 2 or 3 episodes of a show that are coming out in one night versus having a more regular drop, you can tell that there's something going on. So is Going Dutch on the chopping block? Are we going to see it? Is it at risk? Who knows? But definitely things to keep an eye out on as we move forward. And then Fallout. So Fallout is like the big action show, I would say, of right now, based on the comic book. And it's super interesting. I never played it's not based on the comics, it's based on the video game. I never played the video game, but it seems like we're getting to the heart of things. There's more monsters than we're seeing before. And we have 3 or 4 different storylines from people that were trapped in a vault, which is kind of the premise of Fallout in a post-apocalyptic future, to people that live on the surface and have been exposed to the elements and some radiation and some form of zombieism they're called ghouls, and a bunch of different other storylines, and they're all kind of converging now. So we are at the point where we should have more lasting impact from every decision that we see on out for the rest of the season. And then we also had our guy, Zach Cherry, who is a character actor. He was in Shang-Chi. He's probably most known for being on Severance most recently, but he is, I think, confirmed dead. As this episode, we discover that his glasses were found in the bottom of a dishwashing disposal after he attempted to confront the person that he believed was doing some immoral / illegal stuff within his vault. And so hopefully this is not the end of us seeing him, but that's my guy. I appreciate, again, as we talked about, someone who I think a little bit later in life started to make a push, and he has a very intentional but subdued delivery, and he's not over the top, but he hits when he hits. And so to see him come up as this character actor and kind of become someone that, at least within acting circles, is a known name, if not just a steady hand and a known force, is also pretty cool. So hopefully this is not the end of him, but he had a great run, but maybe he had some conflicts with Severance and they are upping his episode request over there. So they had to write him off of it. But he was definitely a person of color, no less, that was on two of the bigger shows happening right now. So happy for him. Hopefully not the last time we see him on Fallout, but it's not looking good. All right. And that is our checking the gate for television. So we've checked the gate. We've looked at our guide. We've seen all the episodes that we've seen this week. Actually, we haven't, because I want to talk about Cartoon Corner. Cartoon Corner is going to be just a little quick insight into some of the animated offerings that are going on in television. I started to get into Primal, which is a crazy show. I'm late. It's on season 3, and I'm just now at season 1. I'm not going to talk about it because I'm not current with it, but it is so far an animated show with no words, but it is captivating and it is super interesting. And I look forward to becoming current with that show. But a show that I am current with that is on Amazon Prime is called The Darwin Incident. And this is a very interesting show about a child who is a hybrid human / chimpanzee, which may or may not have been the result of some lab scientist making love to a monkey, but I don't think they've explicitly said what has happened. But this human chimpanzee hybrid is smarter than humans and is faster and stronger than chimpanzees. So he's kind of this perfect hybrid, but also he is very detached and jaded by his experience of being ostracized in the world. And so his affectation is just, I love it. It's completely unbothered, and kind of he knows at any given moment that he could fuck up everybody in the room and is not pressed to do anything. But he's along for the ride, and that is on Amazon Prime. This episode, you see him use some of his deduction with his strength. He was attacked at his home in the previous episode. In this episode, he just nonchalantly is able to figure out where his attackers are based on the way that they walk and their footprints. And he just completely messes them up, ends up getting thrown in jail, and is chilling in jail, just unbothered, just going through the motions, and hears his friend shout out his name after she is being attacked, and he just completely rips out of the jail, letting everybody know, like, this was all just for show. Like, that wasn't actually going to hold me. I was in there because I figured you wanted me to be in there, but the minute I needed to get out there, we was ready. It was active. So if you're into high concept sci-fi stuff, which obviously I am, The Darwin Incident, I think it's 4 episodes in the first season on Amazon Prime now. I'll be talking about that every week, as well as any other cartoon stuff that I come across whenever, like Rick and Morty or anything else that is in season that I watch in the Cartoon Corner. But that has been Checking the Gate for real this time. Not the episode, but just the segment. And we are going to take a quick break, be right back, and we're going to talk about some of the films that came out this week. Okay. Talking about a film that I saw this week, which we're going to talk about under the Black Independent Spotlight section. And that film was Terri Joe Miami Missionary. And that is a crazy name. And the movie was even crazier. And it was not at all for me. And I felt like I had to force feed myself. But we got there. I got through it. It is a show that stars a social media, TikTok, Instagram talent. And he or they are a member of the community, I think. But this guy, this person who goes by Psionic, Psionic. is a drag queen, maybe, or perhaps just someone that does a lot of characters. I'm unsure of their particular story, but I know that um, their work, both in this show and their social media, is based off of playing several different characters, a lot of which go across gender lines and gender norms. And in this episode, not episode, but in this show, the main character is a woman who identifies as white, but is black in the story, but is played by someone that was born a man, and encounters some drag queens who kind of help her along the way, but then also she meets up with her cousin who is played by the same actor. There's a lot going on in this show, but it wasn't for me. But I think it is also important to acknowledge and to support when you get opportunities for more emerging voices to have budgets and to have rollouts that are commensurate with, what some of the, bigger, more established artists and creatives are coming out with. And so this movie was on Tubi, but it was like promoted as, their new offering. And I actually found it on Rotten Tomatoes for their list of new streaming movies. And I think there's obviously some parallels there with Tyler Perry in terms of his Medea character, and Eddie Murphy and Marlon Wayans in terms of having someone play multiple characters in the same movie and playing off of each other. But for sure, there's definitely, I think, a strong tie to the LGBTQ community, as I mentioned with the drag queens. And I looked and did some superficial research into the creator, Psychonic, and I saw that there was some stuff there that they speak out about, and some issues that they've run into by being targeted for their beliefs and for their background. So I think that is another layer to this, beyond just wanting to play different characters and doing it in a less nuanced way. But it wasn't for me. But shout out to them, and shout out to that bag, and shout out to Black voices getting money to create stuff. And the production value is pretty solid. It was a bunch of different locations. Nobody that I recognized from the cast from other places. But it was there. They knew what they were doing. They had a steady hand, and it seemed like they had either a big enough budget to do what they needed to do, or they were being very deliberate, intentional, and economic about using whatever budget they had to make sure that they got a production value they needed. And I thought they succeeded at that. So that was a win. Outside of that, in looking for that, which again, Terri Joe Miami Missionary, that is my Black independent spotlight of the week. But when I was looking for that, I came across another movie, which is called, one second. Once again, for the very first time, and that is a 2023 film. And this film, I looked at it, I saw the cast, I watched probably like 30 minutes of it, and I was like, I just know that this is a Black creator getting in their bag. Super experimental, a lot of spoken word, a lot of dance. Also, full disclosure, not particularly for me at all. But when I looked, it wasn't even a Black creator. It was created by Boaz Yankin. I believe that's how you pronounce his name. And this guy is actually the writer and director of the movie Fresh, which I was like, wait, that wasn't a black director or writer either. He's Israeli. And the movie Fresh from the 90s, I love it because it has chess in it. It has Samuel L. Jackson, Juan Carlos Esposito. Definitely like a seminal New York movie about hustlers, about a young kid being smarter than everybody else. Very dope movie. And then this guy also directed Remember the Titans. And I'm like, oh shit, that wasn't a black director either. But it wasn't. And it just, it kind of fucked me up. But it was also like, okay, well, how do I feel about this? I think that this story in particular and Fresh before that, and he's had a couple of other films that have had success. He writes a lot. He did some writing on the Now You See Me, Now You Don't franchise and on a couple of other stuff. But this story and Fresh in particular, I think, are black stories. And I think that they're told well and speak to my experience. And I don't think do a disservice to the race or to the culture. But also it's like, okay, I'm definitely looking at it differently, understanding that this is not coming from someone that is like me from a race standpoint. So this guy actually, he went to my high school, Bronx Science, shout out to Wolverines. He's older than me. But you know, it also is interesting to see how much of like New York City, and then just inner city transcends race and culture. And then I'm curious to see what his thoughts and responsibilities and comfort level were with telling stories that he might intimately know from his access and how he grew up and where he grew up. But also, like, was he concerned about telling a story that isn't about his community? And he did go on to have some stories that he both wrote and directed, which were more about the Jewish community. So it's very interesting. So he's not just only doing black stories, but this one in particular, again, it's called Once Again for the First Time, and it is super experimental, and there's so much going on there. But the cast is like 97% black. You have people from the community in it. You have younger people. He apparently works with children, I guess, from Fresh to this, you know, this is 30 years later, but, you know, he has a rapport and an understanding of how to direct younger talent. But then, you know, the primary cast is, you know, in their 20s, 30s. There's some older people in it too. So, but 95% of the cast is still black, which is very interesting. And, you know, for me, I was like, okay, well, it made me question a lot of things. And then I was like, okay, well, he probably was dating a sister, you know what I mean? Like, he probably had a little somebody in his ear. So I went and then I looked, and his ex-wife is actually partners with Byron Bowers, who is the guy that played Doorman from Wonder Man, who we talked about last episode, who is an African-American guy. So he was not dating a sister, but his Israeli wife went and got with a black man, and now they have mixed children. So I guess she was in the black dudes and she was in him. So there's some more overlap in that messiness, but do with that information what you will. But I thought it was fascinating and interesting, and also brought us back to Wonder Man. So yeah, that's what happens when you check the gate. You find weird connections. So yeah, those are the two films that I'm roughly going to put under the black independent spotlight. Terri Joe Miami Missionary is the pick for sure, because I don't want to get it confused. But in search of that film, I did find Once Again for the First Time, which I think is a movie worth watching. But again, it's not coming from a black director or writer, but does have a primarily black cast. Yeah. Don't shoot me. Don't at me. You can at me if you want. I want the engagement, but I'm just saying that's what it was. no harm, no foul. Props to him. Shout out to Wolverines. You know what I mean? Cast me in your next movie, matter of fact. You know what I mean? But shout out to Boaz. Shout out to Byron Bowers, and shout out to whatever that blended family looks like. Yeah, but that was the Black Indie Spotlight. And I'll talk now about this film more broadly. So this week we had the show or the movie Mercy come out. And Mercy is starring Chris Pratt, who some of you may know from Guardians of the Galaxy, where he plays Star-Lord. People who are more initiated into the film and television world, you probably know him as Andy from Parks and Recreation. But the real OGs, the ones that aren't afraid to say it, we know him from Everwood, back in the day when CW was still a thing. And anyway, Chris Pratt from back in the day, who is a great actor, but phenomenal career arc more than he is an actor. But just to go from being on the CW to being a blockbuster star, from Guardians of the Galaxy to Jurassic Park to Mario, like he's doing some big stuff. And to come from what I do not appreciate at all as a platform called the CW, which I think is just like teen drama swill. But he made it, and props to him. And he has a new movie out called Mercy. It is an action thriller. It is most commonly compared to The Minority Report, which is 2000 Tom Cruise, and War of the Worlds, which came out last year starring Ice Cube. And the comp between those two is because it deals with him being a accused criminal who is set before an AI, which is using all technology at their disposal to create a presumption of guilt or innocence, very much like the precogs in Minority Report. But this film also takes place with him being strapped into a chair for 90% of it, very much like War of the Worlds starring Ice Cube, which was shot during the pandemic, and he wasn't strapped to a chair, but Ice Cube plays the IT guy in that movie, which was already, I think, a bridge too far for most people, and was attempting to solve a bunch of stuff while backseat, deciphering. And it got just completely wrecked in the comments and in general reception. People were not fucking with War of the Worlds 2025. I thought that movie was imperfect. It wasn't good. It wasn't horrible, but it wasn't good. This movie, I think, was pretty good, but people have been completely kicking its ass as well. I probably give this movie more of like a 7, maybe 7.5, more than like the 4s and 3s that I think is generally what people are trying to give it. But I think Chris Pratt does a good job of maintaining your attention throughout it, despite not being physical and being in more or less one location for the majority of it. But the main thing for me was just the writing. From a high concept and a sci-fi standpoint, and just a general script writing standpoint, there was at least 3 twists in it that I didn't see coming. Maybe people saw it, but I doubt anybody saw every twist in this movie coming. Because some of them, quite frankly, are unnecessary. But I thought that they worked, and it really keeps you going and guessing until the very last minute, where it's like, okay, you're not really so much guessing, but you're on your toes, because even when you think it's resolved, it's not resolved. And I also think, it's interesting commentary about AI, about innocence, about how we can use everything at our disposal in order to try to ascertain a particular set of outcomes or to prove a particular point. but there was also, especially for someone that was strapped in a chair, unable to leave, there was a lot of action in it. Everything that was happening externally was a lot, but I think part of the issue with this movie and with War of the Worlds is that the action that you see in the movie is shown to you on a second screen in the movie. So you're watching a screen of a screen, which I think, that level of removal takes away from people's appreciation of it. But there was a lot going on. I enjoyed it. I think it's worth it. Not as good as The Wrecking Crew, last week's film. This film, I think, is only in theaters and video on demand, but it definitely screams that it's going to be on streaming soon. Probably, I would wait for it to come out in your house on streaming and then just watch it. It's a good, Saturday night, Sunday movie. It'll keep you engaged. It's not going to change your life, but I thought it was good. Other than that, there were a bunch of documentaries which came out this week. I didn't see Becoming, which I know is Michelle Obama's documentary, which is on Netflix. Or I don't even know if it's a documentary. I know Melania and Michelle both had projects. I don't know whether they're biopics or documentaries, but they both had projects that dropped this week. One was Melania and the other one is Becoming. So I'll definitely check up on those. But what I did watch was I'm Chevy Chase and You're Not, which is the documentary on Chevy Chase, which came out earlier this year. It came out to HBO Max this week. And yeah, I thought it was very informative. I would give that like an 8. I am a Community fan. Community is probably top 10. There's definitely a point in my life where it was top 3, maybe even like my favorite show. I will admit that it doesn't have the same rewatchability that I wish that it had. I'm looking at you, Arrested Development. That's my GOAT. But it was definitely a show that was foundational for me. And Chevy Chase was on that show. He had a very problematic history with that show and ended up getting written off / fired. Some of which I knew, the details of which I didn't know. I actually heard about this documentary because it was coming across that Shirley from Community, who is played by Yvette Brown, was not going to be in the Chevy Chase documentary and didn't like the fact that other people from the show had spoken about her experiences on the show and would rather have just been completely left out of it. But I say that to say that is my personal relationship with Chevy Chase. I knew of him from Saturday Night Live. I wasn't old enough to know or to see his run, but I was aware of it. I was aware he was a founding member. I know, Fetch, National Lampoon, but a lot of the stuff that he was big on, and when I guess he really had like his heyday, was before I was an autonomous consumer. Some of it, maybe I was old enough to had been brought to a movie or to see secondhand, but it wasn't something I was going to be like, hey, let me see that. But I always kind of had him in my mind as one of the comedic greats. And I think he's an OG for sure. And I think that he has, a troubled history and he's problematic. And I think that the way that he interacts with some people on set is definitely worth noting, as an actor and as someone in the film industry. Just you can see that despite his meteoric talent, that the desire for people to work with him is almost immediately extinguished by some of their interactions with him. And some of that I think is him having diminished mental facilities as he got older. And he had a couple of health issues, which I think impaired his ability to really be who he was in the past. But some of it, I think, was just his snarkiness. And I wasn't aware of how much of like his comedy is physical. Again, because when I came to know him, he was older and he wasn't as much of a physical comedian, but like he's a funny guy. And I think he is, an OG, but like so much of his stuff is like slapstick and so much of it is like crude or just like so basic that I was like, oh, okay, like he's funny in a way that is a lot more on the face than I thought it was. And that's not my particular brand of comedy. And for me as an actor, especially here in Atlanta, I think a lot of what I experience and a lot of what I try to be cognizant of is going too big and how much of like what people's default is here, especially, is to do these like caricature-esque, grand, silly. Like I think I'm funny, but like I one of the biggest things I always say is like I love funny, I hate silly, and silly is just kind of like situationally funny that I don't think is repeatable. And to me, I think silliness is something that like you can make anybody silly if you really wanted to. I don't think it's easy to make anybody funny. I think funny is something that like you have to kind of work at and you have to be on top of. And like as much as I love him, like I think Martin Lawrence is silly. Like again, don't at me if you want, but like not that he's not great, not that he's not comedic, and not that he's not even funny, but like if you had to, I think divide him into whether he was silly or funny, like he's silly, and there's nothing wrong with being silly, but silly is also something that I think is more common and was not where I had envisioned Chevy Chase as, because he's kind of been put on this pedestal and on this Mount Rushmore of comedy because he's one of the OGs of Saturday Night Live and, created so much other stuff. But like, to me, like Robin Williams, that motherfucker is funny. Like even like Jim Carrey, and Jim Carrey is where it really starts to get like weird, because I think a lot of what Jim Carrey's comedy started off as was like the cable guy of just pushing cringe, which is not something that I personally enjoy. And I think like just trying to make situations awkward for the laugh is, a third and completely separate thing. But I think he was more of that wheelhouse, but then also had like a ton of silliness. But I think that like he is actually like super funny on top of all of those things, and like was doing these things as things that were in his bag of comedy more so than like being someone that was this. And to me, again, not being completely familiar with Chevy Chase's full filmography or his journey, but from watching this, it seemed like a lot of what made him who he was slapstick and being a physical comic. And I think he was talented in other ways. But when he wasn't doing the physical comedy, it was more of a snarky assholeness than it was like truly being clever. And I think like the combination of him not being able to be as physical because of his age, and just the toll that being that kind of comedy takes on you. And then the fact that like snarkiness can like rub people the wrong way, or just, it wears thin after a while, kind of explained his trajectory, and kind of how he ends up where he is. And then also, the drug use was a huge part of his story as well. But I think super important, super interesting, especially as an actor, if you're trying to understand what the arcs of like a superstar are and what it is to be someone that can open a movie and is literally at the pinnacle of what box office success is, and is able to have any movie he wants, what that looks like and what went into that, and then also like what the other side of that looks like, and how you have to kind of adjust to your new norms, and like not being self-aware enough to understand what some good decisions are for you as an actor or as a creative, and what some aren't. Super interesting. But that is, I'm Chevy Chase and you're not, and this is Weekend Update. No, but that was I'm Chevy Chase and you're not. That's on HBO Max, or just Max. I don't know what the fuck they're calling it nowadays, but it's on streaming. So I would definitely recommend that. Definitely homework, I think, for actors more so than anything else, but enjoyable and good context for where we're at as a consumer of comedy in the world in 2026 as well. But yeah, that's film. So that is our episode for this week. Again, this was episode 2 of Checking the Gate. It's been real. We've looked back. We've checked the gate. The gate is officially clear. I'm Owen Rogers. Be sure to like and subscribe. Follow us on Instagram. Follow us on X at Checking the Gate. That's checking without a G. CHECKINTHEGATE on Instagram and on X. And then we're also on TikTok at Checking the Gate Pod. And feel free to send an email to checkingthegatepod@gmail.com as well if you have any questions or suggestions. Appreciate all of you guys as well. It's been real. I will be in San Francisco for the Super Bowl festivities this upcoming week. My goal is to get episodes out to you guys on Monday, but it might come out on Tuesday or maybe even Wednesday, depending on what my travel looks like next week. But trying to stay consistent. So make sure you guys watch. I'm looking at all the impressions and all the stuff on the back end, so I know who's listening. I know who's not. But I appreciate all of you. It's been real. This has been Checking the Gate. I'm Owen Rogers. See you next time. Peace.